We've been trying to get you ready for Glimmerglass on the Grass. My name is Kathleen Isley, and I am a member of the Guild of the Glimmerglass Festival. This is a program that started about 20 years ago with some people from the Guild, and we always work in close partnership with the company, particularly with Director of Communications, Brittany LaSavoy, and also with other artistic staff, as you will meet tonight. Now, I thought that Brittany was a young Wonder Woman and she was doing this by herself, but she's had two people helping her all along that I just met tonight. Charlotte I'm not going to say her last name. I can't pronounce it right. And Micaiah. And they've been helping with this. So I appreciate them very much. As we've done in the past, Charlotte is muting the audience, but you're going to have a chance to ask questions of our speaker tonight by using the chat room and perhaps a few minutes at the end. So our final program of the Talking Opera series focuses on the world premiere of The Passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson, a new play with music in it to celebrate the founder of the National Negro Opera Company. The two individuals who will be talking to you about this piece are Sandra Seaton, playwright, author of The Passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson, and Kelley Rourke, dramaturg and librettist for the Glimmerglass Festival. Kelley, I thank you so much for arranging for Ms. Seaton to speak to us tonight. I'm so glad we can hear more about this new piece from its very creator. And I welcome Ms. Seaton to our online Talking Opera program. I'm turning things over to Kelley to introduce Ms. Seaton more fully as they begin their discussion of The Passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson.
Good evening, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here and to see all of these familiar faces, all of these opera friends, and to be here with my great friend and colleague, Sandra Seaton. Some of you, if you've looked at her website, you may know these things already, but I'll just give a tiny little overview. She is a playwright and librettist with 12 plays to her credit. They've been performed in cities throughout the country, including New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Many of you may have seen last summer her solo opera From the Diary of Sally Hemings. We did a film version with Allison Cambridge. And I believe that's still up on our website. If you didn't catch it before, you should catch it. It's a really special, wonderful piece. The music is by composer William Bolcom. It's been performed everywhere from Carnegie Hall, the Kennedy Center, the Rialto Performing Arts Center Atlanta in San Francisco, the Library of Congress. It is such an important and special piece, so I urge you to check it out. She's the recipient of the Mark Twain Award for Distinguished Contributions to Midwestern Literature. She's been awarded residencies at Ragdale, Hedgebrook, and Yaddo, many other distinctions in her wonderful career. Sandra and I first met in 2019. She received a commission from Washington National Opera's American Opera Initiative. And I am the dramaturg at both Washington National Opera and at Glimmerglass, as some of you may know. And so in my capacity at Washington National Opera, I really kind of stood beside Sandra as she and Carlos worked on this stunning, moving opera. And it was my great pleasure to watch the development of that piece. And we had many long conversations. And it was wonderful to get to know Sandra as an artist and a human being. And I was so thrilled when Francesca decided to commission this piece this summer. I think this is an artist we want to hear more from at Glimmerglass, and certainly a story that we all need to hear. And so I wanted to start by asking Sandra, who's been doing so much research on Mary Cardwell Dawson, tell us a little bit about Mary Cardwell Dawson. Tell us a little bit about her life and work.
Well, thank you so much, Kelley, for that absolutely fabulous introduction. My goodness, wow. Well, Mary Cardwell Dawson was the founder of the National Negro Opera Company. And what that means today, we have so many organizations, and we have a world that has with much more diversity than we had in 1942 or 3 when she founded the opera company. Mary Cardwell Dawson grew up in the South. Her family moved north. She went to the New England Conservatory. I think she was probably one of a couple of African American students. She got a degree in teacher training. And I think she went to see concerts in Boston at the opera there. And she saw Aida. She talked about going backstage and seeing several hundred singers and never seeing not one individual, not a singer, not a technician, no one, not out of all that group. And this would have been when she was a student at New England Conservatory. There was no African American there. But this is the story of Aida, and there was no African American there. And I think she knew early on that this was a calling for her. So she had been given this privilege of going to NEC. And she thought because she had been able to do this, that she had a responsibility to offer opportunities for others of her own race. And she did do this. She had she formed it was a Mary Cardwell Dawson school, and this was prior to her forming the National Negro Opera Company, and started off with the performance of Aida at a convention of the National Association of Negro Musicians. And she went forward with that. And as you can imagine, it was not an easy time for her. And in DC, where she finally had her performances, it was segregated, and the performing arts halls were segregated, but she refused to perform under segregation. So she had even a difficult time finding space, and she gave so many opportunities to singers of color and started them on their way. You probably know the name Robert McFerrin. He started with Mary Cardwell Dawson. She's worked with Madame Lillian Evante, who sang La Traviata for her, appeared in La Traviata. So she was giving opportunities to singers when it wasn't possible anywhere else.
Tell us a little bit, and another thing I want to acknowledge is that the process for this piece has been quite fast, when it comes to writing a new play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think particularly a play that's based on such a rich character, the amount of time that you have had to write the whole play is probably the amount of time that you would have wished to spend on research, right? To get to know the life. Tell us a little bit about how you started coming to know more about Mary Cardwell Dawson. You've had some really wonderful conversations with various people as you've worked on this piece. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I started out talking to Karen Bryan, who's Mary Cardwell Dawson's biographer, And she had, my goodness, she had just tons of material. And I read her article, and I can recommend, this is an excellent article. It's called Radiating a Hope, Mary Cardwell Dawson as Educator and Activist, and I highly recommend this. It's from the Journal of Historical Research in Music Education, and I think you can find it online. You can find it at, it's available through research libraries. And it goes through and it talks, it's an excellent piece about Mary Cardwell Dawson. Well, I talked to Karen Bryant. We must have had, oh my goodness, 10 conversations, I don't know how many. And she was just fascinating. I talked also with Naomi Andre, who's the author of Black Opera. Naomi was wonderful to talk to because she's taught a little about, she's taught, in her history of African American music. She covers Mary Cardwell Dawson and also the opera Olango. And I looked through old Ebony magazines. I talked to George Shirley, the tenor, who was very, very helpful, because the interesting thing is that George, well, I asked him if he knew anything about the Watergate barge, because that is where my play is set. This is where Mary Cardwell Dawson performs, or hopes to perform. This is the outdoor setting in DC. We're not talking about the Watergate Hotel now. I don't want to confuse the two, because that's another story. But it turns out that tenor George Shirley had performed on the Watergate barge with the Navy band. So he had some personal experience about it, and that was so important to me, because I couldn't picture it singing on this big boat until I talked to him, and and it was just so incredibly helpful. So this whole, the research came from all kinds of places.
That conversation with George Shirley must have really been something, because I have to say, my favorite parts of the play are your writing about the floating stage. It's just such beautiful lyrical writing. I can't wait for an audience to hear that.
Well, I'll just say one.
Yeah,
Okay, go on. No, just about George Shirley, and I don't know if we'll get to this, but or I could save it when we talk about opera, about my interest in opera, or should I? Yeah.
Well, that's where I was going to go next. Is
Okay.
you're a playwright first, but you've had this lifelong interest in opera, and yeah, let's hear a little more about that.
Well, I would say that I grew up around people in my family. I grew up in a world of music. My grandmother played ragtime piano, and she would sing songs. Her husband's first cousin was Flournoy Miller, who wrote the book for Shuffle Along. And so I knew about all these songs. And I think just the idea of combining words and music early on, somehow it seemed right. And when we moved to Chicago in high school, I played the viola, went downtown to the Chicago Conservatory, and listened to WFMT. But more than that, I think when I grew up, opera was really the popular music. So, I could listen to, say, for instance, the Ed Sullivan Show. And you could hear Collis, you could hear Anna Moffo, you could hear Risa Stevens. I was thinking about the names, uh, and it just wasn't unusual. It was just a part of that world. And so, I just felt a love for it early on. And then in high school, starting to listen to WFMT every morning, kind of morphed into listening to the Met, and that's when I started listening to the Met. And the interesting thing was there was this singer that I heard all the time named George Shirley. And I had never, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he was Black. And the thing that we take for granted today because we have, you know, we have the media, we have the internet. I don't think we didn't even have computers then. So how was I going to know what George Shirley looked like? The first African American to have a tenor, to have a continuing presence at the Met. And we have become, over the years, we've become very good friends. I've written things for George. We've worked together, and it started out listening to the Met on Saturdays and wondering, who is this guy? I just hear him all the time. Just had no idea. So it's almost as if it comes full circle. Thinking of like my favorite opera. I don't. It's like saying, what's your favorite child? I just love it all. Of course, the Puccini and Verdi and Massenet, Thais, and but I love Wagner. I can sit through a whole Wagner opera. I love William Balcomb's contemporary work, and I just could never imagine a world without opera. I was so worried when I thought that we were going to lose the Met, and then the Toll Brothers took it over, and I was really happy about that. So that's kind of my thing, and I didn't really, to tell you the truth, I thought a lot more about the music, just listening to it, because I didn't know the languages. I knew the emotion, and I knew when the words were the soaring quality. But when after I met William Balcomb, and I met him because he wrote a book called Reminiscing with Cecil and Blake about my family, about Shuffle Along. And then we met. He did some not incidental music, but he gave me his rags for my play, The Bridge Party. And then he was approached by Florence Quivar. Florence Quivar asked for a piece about Sally Hemings, and then Bill contacted me. And all of a sudden, after working on that piece for for quite a long time, for about a year, and the premiere and so on, that's when I started to think of myself as a librettist, and not just a playwright, as a librettist. This was in 2000, and the premiere was in 2001 at Coolidge Auditorium. So I think that's when it all started for me. But then it, you know, thinking back, it was all really natural, this intersection of words and music. And of course, working with William Balcom was just an incredible opportunity because he's a master at setting music, and he studied with Theodore Rettke, the poet, who was also had a great understanding of music and words. So I've gone on a while here, but I think that's how that opened doors for me, because that's when I started realizing the importance of the words. It wasn't just the music. And my own background in music, it all started to tie together.
The Diary of Sally Hemings is such a special piece, and you've had so many wonderful singers sing that. I want to go back to the Diary of Mary Cardwell Dawson, the passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson, because actually what it very much isn't is a diary. And you and I spoke early on. It was very much Francesca's idea that this play was to give us a sense of her life and a sense of her accomplishments and her struggle, and to have some music in it. And I remember you saying, you know, well, that's not necessarily what a play is, and just that struggle of how can we teach people some of these facts, but have some integrity as a play. And that was a real kind of interesting challenge that we dropped in your lap that you had to wrestle with. So talk a little bit about that and how you ended up framing the piece.
Oh, wow. Well, I remember how I started out. I started out with Karen Bryan's interviews, thinking about those. And then I reworked those into Mary Cardwell Dawson speaking to me herself and talking to me about her world. And then, you know, I had this backdrop, but then in order to write the play in present time where those people are, you really have to lose a lot of the history. I mean it's, you want accuracy, you want it to be historically plausible. It's not a documentary. It's not a, because history becomes baggage when there's too much of it, and then you end up with too much exposition, and that doesn't make a play. So it's almost as if you kind of pretend. I suppose it's pretending, but it's not pretending, because there's something happens when you start to write a play. It's muscle memory. And by muscle memory, it's the same thing that happens when you know a password and you can't write it down, but you remember it when you type it in. Or I guess pianists do that too, or singers, they have this muscle memory thing. So there's this muscle memory component, I think, when you start to write, if you've written plays. Because, you know, you've seen your work staged, and so you know what you have to do for it to be something that people can use and not want to leave after, you know, the first 15 minutes or whatever. So you leave that world, you leave the books and the papers and all that behind, and you enter that world. It's like going into a time machine. So I'm not there anymore in 2021 or 2020. I'm there with in 1943, and I'm talking, and I have, you define the voices. I'm talking the way she would talk, not the way I would. The characters don't talk the way I would talk. And then you start at something called in media res. You start in the middle of things. You define the situation, and then you move forward with it. And she had quite a situation. How do you find a performance space in segregated 1943 DC? And, I probably, as far as the situation, as far as the setting goes, you're going to have to, as a writer, you're going to have to kind of invent. That's a very nice way of saying make things up. Some people call it lying, and this is history, so I'm not lying. And but I guess everybody that's ever written anything, use your imagination, whether it's Verdi or Puccini, imagining these kids hanging out and having, a party or whatever, and young artists. And so it's a combination of imagination and what's historically plausible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's also, what does the form demand, right? That's why a movie based on a book invents things that weren't in the book or cuts things out. It's like, what does a play demand? What does a film demand? What is history? And then you say, what is this thing that I'm making? What is useful? We have a question that came in. You may have sort of answered this, but I'll give you a chance to answer it a little more clearly. The question is, why do you refer to The Passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson as a play with music rather than as an opera?
Well, okay. An opera, Mary Cardwell Dawson, first to know the plot, and here's the plot of Mary Cardwell Dawson. She's there with these three singers, and they're getting ready to perform on the Watergate barge. And it's an outdoor facility. The first night, the weather hasn't been great. So they're rehearsing Carmen, right? So the music in the play is the opera Carmen. And I guess, is it okay just to start talking about that, or are we supposed to wait till the premiere? I don't know. But yeah, okay, I got the thumbs up. Okay, so we have, I mean, you've probably heard, or I don't know if you've seen Masterclass. That's a kind of a play with music. There's also Lady Day Emerson's Grill or Bar, and that's a kind of a play with music. But they're different than this. But the idea is you take a regular play, but the people in the play are using music in some way. And that's why it's called a play with music. So it has to fulfill all the elements of the play as far as, dialogue, structure, setting, and the music comes in because that's what the characters are working with, if that makes sense. But it's not the opera Carmen. Okay. So, there's a problem. Okay, you get this play with music, which is a funny kind of animal. Okay, I'll grant that. So what you have to do is figure out a way for the action to go ahead and for the plot to advance and not have it stop and lose itself every time they do a bit of a rehearsal for Carmen. That's the challenge right there. Because you've got this rehearsal going on for Carmen, and you have people, you know, leading their lives. They're thinking about whether the production's going to go on. We're getting into their own particular personalities. We're finding out about Mary Cardwell Dawson and what her life is like and her challenges. And we're doing all this when there is a rehearsal for Carmen going on. And that's why it's a play with music.
One of the things that I love about the play, you know, as I've watched it evolve over the past, it feels like a year because it's been so much work from you and so many rewrites, but it's only been a few months. But I love how you're defining, okay, this moment of rehearsal, we're going to learn this about this character. It really is characters unfolding throughout the rehearsal. And one of the things that might interest people on this call is that, you know, normally if you're doing a new piece, whether it's a play, an opera, anything, you research it, you write it, you have a workshop, you go away, maybe you have another workshop, go away, then you rehearse it, then you have a premiere. Everything is different this year, which has taken, you know, a huge amount of work and flexibility from all of the artists in the festival, but especially for this piece, which is a new piece. And one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is that we're actually having the workshop week right up against the premiere. So normally when we start rehearsals, we might read through the piece and then we're getting it on its feet, right? The director is saying, okay, you enter here, try this, do this. That first week, Sandra will be with us and no staging will happen. It's going to be about really working the piece and figuring out how all of the musical transitions work. So she'll be here for a full week doing that intensive workshop work. And then we'll just go straight into stagings. So it's, you know, it's been an interesting year for all artists to be flexible and just make things happen.
You know, one thing
go ahead.
Okay. Just one other thing about the music in the play, that at some point Kevin and I had Kevin Miller and I had thought about putting in, it was really my idea, incidental music, so there would be a line like I told you this would be no bed of roses, and then to do a little piano thing going and you know, stuff like that. And I thought about that, and then I thought, oh no, because it's starting to sound like a silent film, you know, like the Perils of Pauline, you know, the stuff going all through, and so we scrapped that. So that was just one thing that didn't work, that's all.
Yeah, and I'm sure during that week, there will probably be other ideas that come up that some of them may be genius and you'll keep, and some of them you may try out and say, ugh, no, never mind. So it's important to have that workshop time. So we have about 20 minutes left. I have a couple more questions, but I just want to remind people, if questions are coming up for you, if you want to put them in the chat, then as Sandra and I wrap up, I'll get to asking your questions. So don't be shy about putting things in the chat if things are popping into your head. I mean, we could talk straight through to 8 o'clock, but if things are occurring to you, please go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll get there. So as you said, most of the music is from Carmen. That was an interesting thing also. Carmen was in the repertory of the National Negro Opera Company. So we definitely wanted to use some of the music that Mary Cardwell Dawson's singers would have sung. But we also, because it's a new piece, we said we also want something new. Also, as many of you may know, this piece is being written for Denise Graves. Denise Graves is starring in the piece. And is thrilled to be a part of it. And we said, well, we can't write a new show, in this case, it's not an opera, it's a play with music. We can't write a new piece starring Denise Graves and not give her something amazing to sing. You know, because people are, if Denise Graves did not sing by the end of the evening, people might be a little disappointed. I mean, I personally would be disappointed because she's such an amazing artist. And so we commissioned Carlos Simon to work with Sandra on this. Carlos and Sandra worked together on that piece in DC. Tell me a little bit about your process on this aria and how you and Carlos worked together and how much you've spoken with Denise during the process.
Oh, well, thank you, Kelley, and as always, you've managed to do some really interesting things. Well, I couldn't write that closing song, the aria, until I finished the play, or what is now the current draft of the play. Although I could probably work on it for another year, but anyway, there isn't another year, and that's life, that is what it is. But I wanted to bookend that closing aria with what transpired at the start of the play. So I really needed the things that were there. So it's just the words I used. I pulled them from things that happened at the end there, and I enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed it. It was very satisfying. I had Denise Graves read it. That was very satisfying. And Carlos Simon and I have worked before, so I gave it to him. And I showed it to Francesca Zambello at the same time, and she liked it. This is sounding kind of, repetitious, but it's not often that for a writer that you get that kind of feedback that, oh, we like this, and Kelley liked it. So there was something, Francesca decided that she wanted it to be a little longer. So I did go back and add some things. I was worried about what to add, and she said, well, there's nothing like putting in a little repetition, because people really, they like to hear that, and they can leave humming, and that makes sense. And I think Kelley said the same thing. So I gave it to Carlos to set, and I'm really, really looking forward to Denise Graves singing it. Now, I do know that they have had discussions about her voice and what she needs, what she would like to have there. And of course, she's the consummate professional, and I didn't say anything about working with her. She's looking forward to that.
We have not a question, but a fun fact from Mona Shapiro is that Denise Graves is also an alumna of New England Conservatory, which I hadn't realized.
Oh,
she has
yeah.
that direct line, and another connection is that completely separate from this project, Denise Graves, through her foundation, has been involved in raising money for the restoration of the Mary Cardwell Dawson home. So it was just this nice coming together. How aware were you of Mary Cardwell Dawson before this commission?
I just knew very little about her. I have Naomi Andre's book. I knew there was a chapter in it on Clarence White, and I knew just from conversations with Naomi, and that's about it. I had never really. I'd seen. We always subscribed to Ebony magazine, and I had seen her photo there, here and there over the years, but that's about all. So this was great to be able to delve into this.
I'm seeing another question that asks about plans for the piece after its too brief time at Glimmerglass. And, Sandra, you know this, I think there's nothing that can be announced yet, but as soon as this story and this creative team was announced, Francesca started getting calls, and I think there is definitely some interest in bringing the work to other cities. But whatever happens, you at Glimmerglass will have heard it first. So here's another audience question. With a person whose legacy is so big, how do you begin to choose what moments to write?
Oh, that's such a great question. I'll tell you, it was really difficult because I had way too much information. That's why I just had to let it go. Where to start this? At what point do you enter this story? And I think I was talking to Karen Bryan, and she said, it was that Watergate barge when she was on the verge of not being able to meet her obligations and just on the verge of financial ruin. She said that she thought that was the most dramatic point. And that's where I landed.
Another thing worth noting about, to just stage and produce all of these operas was one thing, but she raised all the money herself and with zero foundation support, zero foundation support. What she achieved would have been, we all know Francesca Zambello, the amazing force of energy. And I can't imagine Francesca doing what she did. And that's before the fact of being an African-American woman in 1943. The amount of work that she did to get these pieces paid for, much less, doing the artistic direction, was just extraordinary.
There's just so much there. I was rereading some things and I thought, boy, the next time I write this play, I'm going to have to add this and this and this, because there's just so much. There's so much there. When you think about what she did, she makes Martha Stewart look like, she just did it all. Maybe that's not a good example. She was just like doing everything, everywhere, unbelievable things, all at the same time.
Another audience question that's coming through. Well, here are two twinned questions, similar but different. One is, how do you feel this play will benefit the contemporary audience? Two is, what do you hope young people get from this?
Well, maybe the last one. One thing I hope that maybe young people would get out of it is just not to settle, because she could have performed in the segregated places or just under, but that just wasn't her vision for what she wanted. And you hear this phrase, whatever. Well, she wasn't a whatever person at all. She was going to have standards, and she had just what she believed in. She didn't compromise. And I think that's something that's always important, and then contemporary audiences. I think when people, still when people think of the African American experience, they think of they think about jazz, they think about blues. And even though we know about people like Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, we know about, you know, the singers of the 1800s, you know, just that's sort of vague. I think people don't really, uh, it, it's a fleeting kind of thing. But this brings what it was like to be a part of the world of African Americans in classical music. It brings it puts it, brings it to life, hopefully. And, you know, it was just something that most of us were not aware of. And so I talked about Ed Sullivan's show. That was the white singers. Well, Leontine Price was on towards the end, but basically, opera was thought of as the province of the classically trained white singer, and so we're learning through Dawson that that was not the only show in town.
You know, for myself, anytime I come out of a project, you know, besides kind of sleeping for several days, I look back and I find every project in some way changes me a little bit. And maybe it's too soon for you to talk about how the work on this piece has influenced you. Feel free to say pass, or maybe there's something that you're noticing that this process has changed in you.
Well, I don't know if it's me, but because I would say, just to add what I mentioned, is that what she's talking about is that when people think about the Black experience, uh, maybe they think of opera as something that isn't about the Black experience. It's something that that it's European. It's something that is not about the African American experience. But I think this whole world of Mary Cardwell Dawson and what she had to go through, she went through and struggled in the same ways that somebody like a Fletcher Henderson or a Jimmy Lunsford or jazz musicians had to struggle. So I don't think you can. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you can't discount the experiences of African Americans in classical music and what they did. And you know, the idea, oh, that's white, you know, that's just really wrong.
I have been firing a lot of questions at you. What question have I not asked you that you wish I had asked you? What have I not given you a chance to tell us about?
Oh my goodness. Well, did you want to know anything else I'm currently working on, or?
Yes, that would be great.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, recently, okay, Carlos Simon and I did a piece for the LA Opera, and I had been thinking about I don't know, maybe it was something I heard on NPR or what, but of course it was something that that wasn't the first time I thought about it, but you know how something that you've thought about, you know, I thought about this for years, I don't know, 50 years probably, I don't know, but in one way or another. But it was about what happens to people when they're about to go on parole, or the challenges of life after parole, and about the prison system. And I was thinking about that. And so I created this character this young man who's about to go on parole that very next day. It's called The First Bluebird in the Morning, because he sees this bluebird who gets through the barbed wire. And it's a song, and Carlos set it to music. And it's going to be choreographed by Jamar Roberts, who is the lead dancer with Alvin Ailey, or the resident dancer. And it's going to be sometime this summer. It will be, and I'm thinking August, it will be a virtual film from LA Opera. And I'm very fascinated by this young man in that song and his world. And I would actually like to do a song cycle about him, because about what happens after he leaves. And I had conversations with my sister who knows, and she hasn't been in prison, but she has friends. She knows people who have been, and what it was like for them going into parole. So that's one thing. And the other thing is a piece about Tulsa, 1921, about the Tulsa massacre, and it's a very large piece, a choral work, and the composer is Marcus L.A. Garrett, and this is a commission for the Turtle Creek Chorale, and it's going to be in several places, and also in July 2022 will be performed at Carnegie Hall. And other places in between, but it's something it's sort of a choral work, and it's sort of a play, which is kind of the way I do things. It's just like the play with music or something like that, you know. But this one is a choral work, and Kelley and I have touched base about it also. Did you want to say?
I was just going to say, we will keep us updated, and we will be happy to publicize what you have going on through our blog and Facebook and all of that. You are Glimmerglass family now, and I'm sure people will be really excited to hear more about these pieces. I can't believe this hour has gone so quickly, but the hour has gone. We're just so excited about this piece. For me, I think it's, don't tell the other teams. I think maybe the piece I'm most excited about this summer, because it's something new, where we have the living artists really making it. So I'm just thrilled. I hope we'll see you all there. Thank you, Sandra Seaton, for spending this evening with us. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I think Kathleen has some housekeeping.
Well, yes, I do. First of all, I want to give my thanks to both of you. The talking opera audiences have heard Kelley speak before, and she does such a wonderful job of sort of describing the creative process that goes in all of this that we don't always appreciate when we just sit in our chairs or in our little pods on the audience. So, and I had done a little bit of research about Mary Cardwell Dawson. There's not much out there. I hadn't found the article that Ms. Seaton referenced, but it really seems as if she has a story that's worth telling. She sacrificed so much, and so many people benefited from the sacrifices that she made to try to give African-American singers venues and opportunities to learn and to sing. So thank you for telling her story, and thank you for coming with us tonight, Ms. Seaton.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, yes, but this is our final talking opera, and we've recorded. And what is happening, each recorded program, after Brittany and her staff have a chance to do a little bit of work on it, They are uploaded and you can watch them, or yes, you can watch them at glimmerglass.org/talking-opera / and maybe Charlotte can post that address up. The Guild will send the address out so people can watch all these programs and share them with people that are coming. Miss Seaton, we have to buy 4 spaces this year to go to the opera. So I've had opportunity to get new people coming to the opera this summer. And it sounds like the setting on the barge, and we're going to be watching with an outdoor theater, so that'll be fun. So Talking Opera is ending, but the new Glimmercast podcast has begun. And I found the first one on Spotify just as advertised, and it was a discussion of the magic flute. It featured artist in residence Eric Owen and a director who, like Miss Seaton, is a little bit new to Glimmerglass, and Jay Aguna. So you can find it on Spotify, or you can link it from the Glimmerglass Festival website. So thank you again, Miss Seaton. Thank you, Kelley. Thank you, Charlotte and Micaiah. And good night to fellow Talking Opera fans. Good night.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelley.